Hello. Thanks so much for joining me in this week's Powerhouse session. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jessica Rice. I am a legacy leadership coach and personal branding strategist. I work with executive leaders from Fortune 500 companies to founders to entrepreneurs who are really looking to move into that next chapter that they have been wanting to create. And just excuse me for a moment while we have a little bit of feedback. All right, the fun of going live. So, moving on. Today we're going to talk about how do you really know what your next move should be? What stage are you at? Because I think a lot of times when I'm working with leaders and we're talking about how do they move or transition into, say, an advisory role, a consulting role, sometimes they wanted to move into fractional or, executive board service. They don't really know where to begin because there's a lot of different moving parts. You see a lot of different information online. Sometimes personal branding strategists are only focused on your LinkedIn presence. They're focused on having a polished LinkedIn or how your content strategy is. It's all of it. And it's also your leadership, which is why as a leadership coach, I think it's incredibly important to fully understand where you sit as a leader, where you sit in terms of the expertise that you bring and how you're truly owning this. I was in a chat earlier with someone today. We were talking about the importance of strategy and how strategy isn't everything. And I was also talking to somebody else about, having self-awareness. Well, it's all of it. You can't have one without the other because you are the whole package. And so we're going to be diving into that a little bit more. But the key is, number one, you have to understand what it is that you fully bring. What is it that you're bringing to the table when it comes to your leadership, when it comes to the value that you bring and the convictions that you have in relation to how you want to serve other people? How do you want to give back in a greater way? Because if you don't want to serve and you don't want to give back, then it's going to be very hard for you to want to do all of these other things because it does require effort. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say that it just comes very easily. In fact, advisory and consulting, it requires effort. And so if you don't have the conviction and the passion to want to create an impact, to want to create a legacy, something that you're building upon, the culmination of your career, then it's going to be a very hard journey for you. Money alone can't be the driving factor. There has to be something more, which is why I left my corporate role. So my background was in software engineering, graphic design, branding strategy. I actually started my career doing 3D animation and video editing of all things, and then moved my way into more graphic design. I had an art background. That was actually my first role outside of high school, was painting murals for our local city government, which is an interesting role. And then I moved into software engineering, and that's where I started to move up in my career in much greater ways. I started to lead at the executive level. I was a part of strategic planning, decision making, how we were moving the company forward and how we were growing it in a greater way. That led me to becoming the right hand to the COO and participating in a lot of discussions that were centered around the consumer, the customer. How could we provide them a better experience? And as I started to grow my team, I started to move into executive coaching because I absolutely loved coaching my team. I loved leadership development. I loved helping people to recognize everything that they can bring to the table if only we could fully see ourselves, if only we could see the value that we truly bring and kind of get out of our own way. Now, in that process, I wanted to bridge the gap between coaching, between leadership development, and true brand creation, because it's not just how pretty everything looks. It's not just your content strategy, and it really has to start from within. It has to start from within you, which is why I ended up blending neuroscience and red teaming and all of these different things into my coaching practice in Jessica Rice Coaching. So it's a little bit unique because the perspective that I bring, it's holistic. And I want you to consider for a moment, if you have self-doubt and if you're not considering what you bring as a leader, building your brand equity, understanding how you fit within the market, where you fit within your industry, it's going to be hard for you to understand. How do you start messaging around that? What's your unique value proposition, your leadership value proposition? What is that positioning strategy that only you can bring into your industry? So really consider for a moment, and everybody starts at a different stage. So consider for a moment, what stage do you feel like you are in? Because we all start from somewhere. You might be at mid to senior level in your company, executive leadership, really starting to question what's that next chapter for you. Maybe you're a little bit more senior, maybe you're senior VP, and you're wondering if you're wanting to move into a C-level role or if you're wanting to start that advisory, that consulting. Maybe you want to have a little bit more time, freedom, flexibility. Maybe you don't mind the work, but you're really driven by the passion and the conviction that you can bring to your industry. And sometimes we know, not everybody has to move into C-level. When I'm working with executives, sometimes I'm asking that question, what's next for you? What is it that you're wanting to do? What do you want to see yourself doing in the next 5 years? And I don't know, maybe it's not surprising, but most of the time I get blank stares. It's like a deer in the headlights. I don't really know. And so if you're feeling like that, number one, you're not alone, because I think nothing prepares us for mid to senior level leadership and where we want to take that next chapter. We've been spending the most of our careers following a certain path, following the ladder, whatever you want to call that, into rising up into the next stage, the next title, the next position, the next role. And when we reach a certain level, what's next? It's kind of like you're standing at this precipice and you don't know if you want to take this bigger leap over here. Do you keep following this safer path over here? And if you're risk adverse due to the nature of your leadership, the role that you've occupied, it can seem really scary. Which is why I want to say that building a personal brand has nothing to do with making any drastic decisions or changes. Simply, you are building upon your brand equity. So let's dive into this a little bit more before I just go on and on and on. I have a few slides I can share with you. Let's make sure that everything is working for us today, because sometimes it doesn't. So really, what is your next move? That's what we're here to ask ourselves today, really. So there's 5 questions that I really want you to think about. This is here to help you understand, what stage are you at? What is it that you should be focusing on? Because I think there's this enigma to, okay, if I want to go over here, how do I even approach that? How do I broach that topic? Am I even ready? And asking yourself questions is the best way that you can start to lead yourself down that path. You have to lead yourself to water so that you can drink it. So do you understand your value? This really goes back to ownership. If you struggle with imposterism, if you struggle with self-doubt, or really owning your self-worth, what you bring for your company, then I invite you to wholly own it. I invite you to really consider and honestly take a look at how you bring value to your company, how you bring value to other people that you serve. Leadership is service, and it's service based. So this is not coming from a place of ego or over humility. What you need to have is a practical understanding of what you naturally bring, what you're really good at, and how you can help someone else. And that's all it is. So you need to understand what it is that you bring, what your value is, so that you can start marketing around that, you can start positioning yourself around that, you can start talking about that, and you can start doing work that drives value, it drives meaning, not only for your company, but for your own life. Find those things that you feel most passionate about, because when you feel passionate about something, it shines through. That's your conviction. So the second piece is, do you even understand your brand equity? Many of us don't understand what our brand equity even is, and so we'll cover that in the next slide. But if you don't understand what your brand equity is, then you might want to start there. Start understanding how you start building upon your brand, how you start building upon the equity that you have inside of your company and inside of your industry. Ask yourself, do I have a system? Do I have a framework or a process that I can start developing an intellectual property around? This is your market positioning. This is how you start to differentiate yourself from other leaders. It's not about who's better. We all can win together. It's not a competition. What it is recognizing what you bring. I work oftentimes with leaders on what their natural strengths are. I take them through the Principles U assessment that was developed by Ray Dalio and Adam Grant. We do this for a reason, because sometimes we ourselves are blind to the things that we bring. We're blind to ourselves. We have our own narratives, our own blockages, which is why I blend coaching with brand strategy, why I'm certified in 12 other things, and why I want to bring all of that to my clients, because sometimes we have to look around those blind spots so that we can see ourselves clearly. And that means sometimes stepping outside of ourselves so that we can see what other people see. And that really has a lot to do with the brand equity and what it is that you're building and how you identify how you serve and help other people. So what are those frameworks, those processes, the things that you uniquely have done, maybe just innately or naturally throughout your career, that you could start sharpening, that you could start really building upon? This is a piece that you can start then marketing as an advisor or a consultant or a founder. And then, are you actively building your network? Are you sitting back and are you hoping? Are you playing it safe from the sidelines still? Are you spending time dreaming about things, or are you taking action? It takes action to start making momentum for yourself. So when somebody came to me and said, well, you need to have self-awareness in order to grow as a leader, strategy isn't everything. That is true. However, in order to move our mind from fear to motivation to a reward cycle, you have to be able to take action. And sometimes we need the strategy. We need some direction to feel confident enough to move from fear to certainty to taking action. Because when we can start to move into that, then we can move into that reward cycle. We have a motivation. There's a whole neuroscience around this and how we can move from one part of our brain into another part. And I don't mean to get super sciencey on you here, but this is the piece that sometimes we overlook. And it's not about powering through. It's about deep ownership. It's about deep trust, not only within ourselves, but that following a certain set of steps or a certain path is going to lead to a specific outcome. It's the same thing that you did within your career. There are certain things to follow. It looks different for everyone else. Everyone's a little bit unique. But I want you to consider, if you don't take action, then you stay within fear. You stay paralyzed. And do you have conviction? Do you have a conviction, something that you deeply care about, that you're passionate about? And usually when I'm talking with clients, when I'm talking to someone who's typically maybe a quiet leader, or they stay quiet throughout meetings, I ask them, when do you finally feel like you want to speak up? When do you feel like raising your hand is appropriate? And it's usually when they feel a rise in passion or conviction around a specific topic. And it's different for everybody. So where do you have conviction? Because when we have conviction, when we have purpose, that is the fuel that will move you forward. That is the fuel that you will build your IP around. That is the fuel that you will build your messaging around. And so really ask yourself, when are those little moments, even when you're sitting and you're watching something or you're participating in a discussion or in a meeting where otherwise you might not be participating quite as much. Maybe you feel apathetic about the topic, but all of a sudden you have to speak up because it matters and it matters to you. That's your conviction, and lean into it. So remind yourself, you are the whole package. You are everything. You have to own that. For your own brand, you have to own that. The good, the bad, the ugly, the great, the wonderful, all of the things in between, you have to own it. And you have to recognize your expertise. You have to recognize your leadership, your perspective, your unique views on how things should be done, your unique views on how things should operate. Where do you see the industry that you are passionate about heading? How do you want to make a difference? How do you want to make a change? That's your conviction. So, what is brand equity? It's kind of elusive, and we think about brand equity in terms of corporations, but personal branding has really taken off. We can't go anywhere without hearing something around personal branding. More and more companies are leaning into their executives, their C-suite level, to help grow their company. And really, that brand equity is helping to grow the company. KFC is a perfect example of this right now. Just go ahead and Google the CEO of KFC and you see his name. Now, I don't remember his name at the moment, but his name is the one that's showing up everywhere in relation to how they're growing their brand. So really ask yourself and be honest. So you have your client company perception. This is how other people perceive you. And it's the belief that they have around you and the brand that you bring, what you represent, okay? And then what is the positive or negative impact that you bring? You could also think of it as the positive or negative results that you bring. And if there's areas in there where there's a gap or that needs refinement, take a note, and then you can start to build upon that. And then you can look at your value proposition. This is the return on investment. This is the ROI that you bring to your company, to another company, to your clients. So if you're moving into an advisory or a consulting role, or you want to become a fractional executive, this is your brand equity, and this is what you are continually building upon. It's your reputation. It's what people consider when they think of you. And you start to look at the various aspects that you show up within your industry, within your market, within your company, within the connections that you're making, how you speak, how you talk about the things that you're passionate about, how you represent your industry, how you represent your company, all of it combined. So that's your brand equity, and you're continually building on it. That's your moneymaker. So when we're considering this, sometimes we're looking at branding like logos and visibility and LinkedIn and polish and perfection. It's relationships. It's how you cultivate and build relationships, because those are going to be key in terms of how people consider you and think about you and refer you. Most of us are frozen because we have a lack of belief. We have a lack of self-efficacy. And so if you feel frozen or paralyzed, maybe you're fixated on one little aspect. You're not ready because of this, or maybe this is unclear to you, or there's this one decision that you feel like you have to understand or have to make in order for you to start to grow in these other areas. I want to invite you to really consider what it is that you can let go of. What can you free yourself from so that you can start to move forward? Because building a brand, building leadership, moving into some sort of advisory or next level legacy type of role, there's multiple parts, there's moving parts. It's not just one thing. And so you are continually building and, what do I say, nurturing aspects of your brand, aspects of relationships. There's always a piece that we can pivot toward that help to grow where we're at now and move us in the direction that we want to be. What you believe in, you ignite. When you believe in something and you're passionate about it, you will start to ignite that flame for yourself. You will start to move forward in a direction that maybe you were not even aware of. Maybe you didn't believe that you could do certain things. I know when I first started out, there was absolutely no way that I thought I would be doing this, that I'd be going and speaking live. Absolutely not. You couldn't have paid me enough money. But sometimes when the conviction is high, the passion is high, we start to ignite something within us, and it starts to ignite something within other people, and it creates ripple effects of change. And if that's what you're wanting to create for yourself, for your life, the meaning and the passion and the purpose that you want to bring, that's that culmination of your career, then really ask yourself, what is it worth? What is it worth it for you to make a change, to make a difference, to start building something that you feel incredibly excited about and proud of? That might still be within your company. It might be outside of your company. Maybe it's, maybe they're moving in the same direction. That's not the issue. The issue is, what is it that would spark you? Because when we wake up every day and we feel that spark of excitement, that's renewal. That's the thing that when we look back on our lives, we know that what we contributed to mattered. And it mattered to us, and it mattered to the things that we believe in. That goes into your core values as a leader. That's what leads to action. And I want you to think about, what are the smallest actions that you could take today, just based on things I'm talking about, things that you're doing. What's that smallest piece that you could start moving yourself toward? Sometimes it is just polishing some aspect of your LinkedIn. LinkedIn is organic. It's going to be constantly changing and evolving. I don't fixate on whether my LinkedIn is perfect. I change it. And you should too, just like your resume and anything else. But really consider what resonates for you so that it starts to resonate for your audience. Because if you don't believe in what it is that you're doing, they're not going to believe. They're not going to have conviction or passion around it because you don't. And it shows. So everyone's not at the same stage. Some people have been building upon their brand equity, sometimes without even knowing it. Maybe you're just naturally good at certain aspects of that. Other people, maybe you're a little bit more shy, or maybe you just didn't recognize that there was a way to go about this. Sometimes we can get really hung up on the rules. We're not supposed to do this. We're not supposed to reach out here. I'm really worried about what might happen if I start to put myself out there. What will my company think? What will this person think? Or whatever. Sometimes we get really hung up on these things. So we're all at a different stage. And it's really just asking ourselves and grounding ourselves into, what is it that matters to me? What are the things that I can do that feel right for me? Sometimes we make a lot of assumptions, and I really think that the assumptions that we make are excuses to prevent us from putting ourselves out there. That's our mind telling us, like, well, we don't want to fall flat on our face, so let's just come up with some wild idea that's going to keep us from, complete embarrassment or whatever that looks like. And honestly, there's so many ways that you can go about things, especially in these days. I think it's just a way to play safe. It's a way for us to play safe and feel okay about it. But I challenge you to start making movement, because when we play safe, we stay small and nothing happens. Years go by and nothing happens. There's no traction, there's no movement, and we start to feel stagnant. And that's not where anybody really wants to be. So what stage are you? Well, I've kind of identified 3 different stages that more or less people fall into. There's this emerging advisor, what I call emerging advisor. In this stage, you are budding, you are becoming ready for this new chapter. Maybe it's advisory, consultancy, whatever that looks like for you. And maybe this is where you start to tinker with your LinkedIn profile. Maybe you start to play around with your tagline a little bit. Maybe you start to feel like what resonates for you. And in here, you start to, clarify what your LVP is or your UVP, your value proposition, what makes you unique in your industry, in your company, what it is that you bring, and how you start to articulate that, how you start to message around that. And this is also where you start to document what your intellectual property is, what it is that you do, what makes you unique. Sometimes we have processes and ways that we do that. Sometimes in corporate, we have processes that we do that other people don't really follow, but yet it helps us with our roles. And that's why we're so efficient. That can be your IP. So really start to consider, what is it that you bring, how you approach things, how you problem solve. Maybe it just feels innate, and everybody can do this, but that's usually not the case. And with the hundreds of assessments that I've gone through with natural strengths and what people bring to the table, there isn't one person that has been 100% the same. Now, I've had a few who actually happened to have the same first name, who had very similar profiles, but even then, they had subtle differences. So consider that what you bring is unique. And it's not because you're special and we're giving everyone a gold badge. It's because what you can bring can actually truly help someone else. And that's the perspective that you can have. The next one is powerfully positioned. And this is where you start to really grow upon building a signature framework for yourself. You start to position yourself for growth. This is where you can strengthen your content, your messaging, how you're putting yourself out there into the market. Does your audience understand what you're saying? Are you using language that they get? This is where you start to refine that, and you start to position yourself a little bit more visibly. And then the latter stage is a legendary leaders, like I like to call it. You've probably done quite a bit of this already, but now it's taking that leap, pushing yourself into pitching yourself for different advisory roles or board roles, maybe just finally deciding to say yes. Yes to yourself, yes to the expertise that you bring, not playing safe, and trying this out a little bit more. This is where you also start to build maybe more of a platform for yourself. You start to create a system, a tool, a foundation. Maybe it's its own company. Maybe this is where you move and you fully transition from the role that you have here to this next role. So I have a few things I wanted to show you. So if you registered, and you still can register, it's not too late, which I didn't put into the screen, but you can go to powerhousesessions.com. The links are in the invites. If you register there, I'm going to send you some links. One is to the Executive Brand Assessment, which is here. This assessment enables you to start understanding, what stage are you at? Are you emerging? Are you powerfully positioned? Are you already ready to just step out and make a decision? It's going to ask you a series of questions. I'm going to provide you some additional steps, some things to consider for your leadership. And then from there, it's going to invite you to a consultation with me. We can talk about what's going to be right for you. Where are you at? Because again, not everyone falls perfectly inside of a bucket. So this is where I work with you to think about what could be a right next step, a right strategy for you. And a lot of this we do inside of our community, the Powerhouse Legacy Collective. Now, if you know me, then I've talked about this a little bit, but the Powerhouse Legacy Collective is an online exclusive community designed for executive leaders like yourself. It's designed for people who are ready to take their careers, take their leadership into the next level, and we're blending the strategies I've talked about today. We're blending how do you grow upon your executive presence? How do you position yourself within the market? So it's leadership and it's branding. It's both. And that's what I'm bringing inside of the community. And we have monthly trainings where we cover more in depth, similar to this, but a little bit more in depth. We provide guides and workbooks. There's past trainings. There's a library of books and resources that are recommended for you to read to start growing your brand. And it's a community of people who are very similar in mindset as you, who want to grow, who want to position themselves more so in the market. And sometimes we take for granted having a community, having people around us who are going down the same path that we are. And we expect that other people, either colleagues or family members, are going to understand this newfound calling and passion that we carry. And quite frankly, that adds strain to those relationships. And we don't want to put pressure on those relationships. And that's what this community is here for, so that you can share your ideas and you can talk, and maybe you create new partnerships inside of the community that can then help you as you're growing your brand. So that's the Powerhouse Legacy Collective. I will say that if you join, this is the last week, we have it at $67 a month, or if you pay annually, it's $670. It's moving up to $97 starting next week. So if you'd like to come in as a founding member, this is the last week to do that, and then we're going to be moving into our next wave of memberships. As a founding member, you also have access to the Powerhouse Vault, which incorporates all of the previous trainings that we have covered. From moving forward, it's going to only cover like 2 months of trainings, and then those will get moved into the vault, and then we'll have room for new trainings so as to not overwhelm. But if you want to have access to everything, then join now. And you have 7 days as a free trial to check it out, see if it's a right fit for you, if it feels right. So there's really nothing to lose. So you can join today. You'd have 7 days to try it out, and you could still get in on the $67 a month subscription or not before it moves up next week to $97. So that's what we have is we have the Powerhouse Legacy Collective, but I want to encourage you and invite you to really do the Executive Brand Assessment. There is also, we're sending you an Executive Brand Clarity Audit so that you can really start to figure out and map out what are aspects of your brand that you already have in place, what are aspects of your brand that you still need to work on. And quite frankly, it's just like leadership, that you have always something to work on. When I work with leaders who don't have anything to work on or don't know what to work on, I'm always a little bit surprised. I'm always a little bit sad, because I recognize that they have a lot of room to grow. The leaders who are the most successful are always the ones who come in and they have a long list of things that they know that they need to work on, because they have self-awareness and they recognize that there's always room to refine, to grow, to make better. We always have room for improvement. And much like your leadership, growing a brand, growing an advisory, a consultancy, it requires that growth mindset. It requires all of the things necessary as a leader. And then it's kind of like it ignites it. It puts it into full force, because you're taking all of the skills that you developed as a leader and you're directly applying them to your own life in a much greater way. So leadership and branding to me go perfectly hand in hand, because you have to have both to be successful, to have the tenacity, to have the perseverance, to continue forward. So really consider for yourself, number one, are you owning, again, everything that you bring? Are you owning that so that you can start to then document what's your IP? What do you bring to the table? How do you start to position that? How do you start to message around that? How do you talk about it? Talking about ourselves for most people is our least favorite activity. I know that they say that we all like to talk about ourselves. We like to talk about ourselves in stories, but we don't necessarily like to introduce ourselves or talk about all the things that we're doing because sometimes that makes us uncomfortable. So how do you start to talk about the work that you're doing and how you help other people in a way that feels compelling and that feels natural for you so that you can start to put yourself out there in a greater way, start to build upon the brand that you want to create and what that next chapter can truly look like so that you can serve and you can have conviction and you have passion and you can do things that you feel ready for. And it looks a little bit different for everybody. But if you're not sure what all that looks like, go ahead and take the Executive Brand Assessment, go through the guide, set up a call with me. Because then we can talk about, okay, here's the pieces of your brand that we can diagnose. And we can start to say, okay, here's a piece that I think would be really helpful, especially for you, for your leadership, for what it is that you bring. Because everyone's unique, everyone's different. And I love working with leaders and hearing about all of the things that they do and really uncovering what's their unique gift. Because that's the gold, that's the magic that you uniquely bring and that you can then help and serve and benefit another corporation, another individual, whatever that looks like. All right. Thanks so much for joining me. Again, if you're curious, you want to know more, go ahead and sign up at powerhousesessions.com. You'll get reminders for next week's Powerhouse session, but it will also then send you the Executive Brand Assessment and the audit, as well as an invite to set up a call with me. And if you're really curious and you want to go and check out the community, you can go to joinplc.com. And that's where we're all hanging out off of social media. It is not on social media. We're hanging out off of social media and we're talking about how do we grow our brand? How do we grow our leadership? How do we grow all of our expertise into something that has greater meaning, greater purpose, greater conviction so that we can truly serve the legacy that we have been building throughout our careers. All right. Thanks so much for joining me today. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Reach out if you have any questions. If you wrote anything into any of the chats, again, when you register, you can join us live on Zoom, and then I can address any questions live and we can talk about it. But I just can't do that anymore with live and social media and the millions of chats. It's too confusing and I can't focus on what I'm actually trying to say to you. So if you want to register, you can join us next week on Zoom. And you can bring any of your questions and we will talk about it. All right, enjoy the rest of your week and I hope to see you online.